Well, hello there. Welcome to this week's Quarantine Note. I guess we're on week 37, day 292. I don't know where we are. We've all been at this for a while now. So per my original promise, I wanted to make sure to get you some really practical, tangible stuff. Today's will provide for a lot of you that have not done online teaching before, or maybe even for a few of you who've been doing it for a while and are looking for a new way to format or frame your discussions, some really helpful practical strategies for that. In fact, I'm not even going to call this a quarantine note today. We're going to call it a quarantine shop, just like a workshop, because this bit is really from a workshop I've delivered, oh gosh, about 400 times, or part of a workshop I've delivered 400 times over the course of my entire career. It has very specifically to do with online learning and very specifically to do with conversations, class discussions, those sorts of things. You might be surprised to hear that by the time we're done today, you may find a better method for having a conversation with your class than you've ever had before. And that's really what we're going for. So if you're new to the channel or you're new to the Quarantine Notes, just a couple of things. I've been doing this for a really long time. I've been teaching online since the late 90s, back when it wasn't, when no one was doing it. I've trained people on how to teach online. I've given keynotes and plenary sessions galore over the course of the last 20 years. And these sort of best bits are what this is all about. If you want to hear more, go back and check out the very first Quarantine Note. That'll sort of explain why we're doing this and how we're doing it. But today, I just want to talk about some kind of rules to live by, some things that you can do to really help make your experience better, help make your students' experience better, and actually might be a better overall learning experience than what you're used to doing, even in the face-to-face classroom. So a couple of things, and this really came from some questions that I got this week about how to do some stuff. I hope that you've got some stuff established in your syllabus already that really start to speak to things like due dates. If you've not done it, and if you're looking for a way to sort of reformat your week, online seems to do very well by saying, okay, at the end of the week, everything's due Sunday night at midnight. Now, if that doesn't work for your class, obviously don't do it. But a lot of online teachers over the course of the last 25 years have figured out if you just make everything due at the end of the week, then people have a full 7 days to sort of plan out their progress, when they're going to look at stuff, when they're going to read stuff, when they're going to watch the videos, when they're going to read the textbook, and then they can pace themselves along the way. So it's nice because there's a nice little timestamp on everything that gets submitted to you, especially if you're using the learning management system that's in place. You'll be able to see when everything was submitted. A lot of them now, I know Canvas does this in my classes I'm teaching right now, tells you when someone is late. And in fact, in the grade book, it colors their assignment a different color. And if you just hover over it, it tells you how late it was. It was 0.92, 90% of a day late or whatever. So kind of interesting. At the same time, make sure that you don't fall into a trap that a lot of us had to learn the hard way back in the early 2000s, late 90s. Make sure that you explain any document types that you'll accept. Will you accept a PDF file? Will you accept a rich text file, which is an RTF? Are you expecting your students to submit .docx files or Google Docs or Google Slides and those sorts of things? Make sure you explain that to your students in writing. Get that out there to them so that no one tries to then say, well, I thought you would take a .docx file, which really isn't a file type. It's not something that exists, but it sure gives students a nice extra 4, 5, 6 days to get the assignment done when you realize you can't open it, and then you write them back and say, hey, I couldn't open your file. And then later that day or the next day they come in and say, I don't know why you couldn't open it. Let me see, how about this one? Can you open it if I do it this way? Don't even get into that junk. That's just silliness that a lot of online learning really kind of centered around all of that when it first started, but don't go down that trail. But those sorts of process things aside, let's really talk about talking. Let's talk about how a classroom discussion should really ensue. Now, I want to tell you, first of all, when it comes to discussions face-to-face, these actually aren't as good as you might think they are. I know a lot of professors really love the discussions. They talk about them being didactic. They talk about the Socratic method and all these sorts of things. But you have students that you call on more than others. Whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, you can go look at all sorts of psychological research about that. You do. There are also students who don't participate. They sit on the fringe on purpose. They try to find a place in the room where they don't have to participate, and they don't. This is going to give you an opportunity to hear from every student. Now, you don't have to read every student's discussion, but you certainly will have that opportunity to really see how every student is taking in the information, making sense of it, and working through it. And because of that, you might consider some of this methodology to not only help you manage it, because this actually allows the students to start to manage one another a bit, but it also gives you some sort of rules for the road that you might consider. You can change any of these, not use any of these, obviously, solely your call to your class. But something that you might consider is to, first of all, start with a minimum number of responses. In my classes, my students have to post at least 5 times during the week, and those posts follow the following guidelines. By the way, this will be on the blog because I know it's going to be small and maybe hard to read, so you'll be able to take it from there, copy and paste it if you like it, use what you like. First of all, you want to tell your students that they have to leverage grammar, proper spelling, capitalization, punctuation. In fact, you could actually link out to a Netiquette site, and I'll show you one of those here in just a little bit, that just says, hey, if you're going to be communicating online, we're not going to do instant messaging here. This is not text messaging like you do with your friends. This needs to be professional. It needs to be correct. And so tell them what those expectations are. I put what you're about to see here, I put this on every discussion that I have throughout the entire course, one every week, at least one every week. This information's on everyone. Number 2, I tell my students when they have to start posting because I want a conversation. When online learning started back in the late 90s, there were a lot of posting forums that were going up where the professor would come in and say, just put up your thoughts. And that's what would happen. One person would put up their thought and 29 other students would copy that thought in their own language, or sometimes not. Sometimes they would just copy it directly. I'm not interested in that. I want to have a conversation. I want to grow and build. This is where a lot of the teaching really starts to take place in an online class. So I tell my students, you have to post your original conversation topic by Wednesday or by Tuesday or whatever works for you. This is going to be the response to whatever the teacher has posted. And then I start to describe what these posts will look like. The opening post, and notice that I didn't put post 1, because if you put post 1 and then post 2, 3, 4, and then post 5, then you're going to get 5 posts all the time. So I really want to try to encourage students to post more than 5 times, but they have to do at least 5 times. So the opening post should be a response to whatever question or topic or concept I've asked students to respond to. I have given them something to react to, and I want them to do that. But when they do it, they need to respond with citations. As you probably are well aware, most students today seem to really struggle with the fact that their opinion isn't a fact. And it's not a fact. They don't realize quite often that what they think isn't necessarily true. So I tell them, please go back and look at the textbook, look at the other discussions that we've had, look at things that I posted in other places, look at my readings, my lectures, go to credible sources that we have talked about, whether those are from Eric or the library or even through Google Scholar or whatever that might be. Post those things in a cited format. So respond with support for that response. At the same time, the conversational posts, which again, if you're only doing 5, this is really looking at post 2, 3, and 4, they should then be responses to other students. And that's especially true of someone who has responded to that student. They should then begin a conversation, a back and forth conversation. But there are times that students don't get responded to, so you can't have them, just sit around waiting for someone to talk to them. Make sure that they now have conversations with their peers. But again, I really try to encourage students at this point to make sure that those responses are critical, that they are not just, hey, great job, or LOL, or whatever, that they actually have to say, you know what, I think maybe you got something wrong. I think maybe you forgot to address this other component. I don't think you supported your argument or your suggestion as appropriately as you could have. And so as I've said here, what red flags did the post or the person who made the post not take into account? or did they create by posting this? Using citations to, again, say, well, you used this citation, but I'm going to use this other citation to say maybe we need to expand the way that we think about this, or whatever it might be. In my classes, my students really get to, by week 13 or 14 of a 16-week class, they are starting to have critical conversations with each other, even though in weeks 2 and 3, they're scared to death to do this. Because as you guys all know, in this day and age, people love to be critical and confrontational when it's anonymous. But as soon as you have to put your name to it, it's amazing to me how many of my students will just not give any feedback that will hurt somebody's feelings. I have to really work them through that and say, this is not about feelings, this is about help. You're helping your peers learn. You're helping them reconfigure how they think about it. You're helping them expand and contract their thoughts. We're really trying to push the envelope when it comes to critical thinking. By the way, this means you don't necessarily have to read every single post by every person. You can start to read the mixes, the things that other people are posting back to other students and saying, hey, I agree with that, or hey, I think maybe you were a little harsh here. I don't know that that's actually true, or we have two things that can both coexist equally, or whatever it might be. You're the expert, but this really gives you a chance to be a facilitator, a consultant, a guide, rather than saying, my word is the only word that matters, just listen to me, regurgitate it, and then forget it after the semester. I'm not interested in that. Then the last post I try to give them direction on should really be a revision of the first post. I want to know how they have taken all of this information and how they have tangibly and practically changed what they thought at the start of the week. How has this influenced them to make a better post, to make a better comment, whatever that might look like? How have they read through their peers' comments and said, oh, I forgot to add X, Y, or Z? And note, I require my students to read all of my posts, because what I say to one student probably applies to almost all students. And so I say to them, you need to take my words to others as well as your peers' supported words to you, and use that to recraft, to edit, to revise your first post. So here I have some language about that very thing. In addition to dealing with things that are directed right at you, you really are supposed to take in the context of the entire conversation. This also ensures that it is a conversation, that it's not just a student reading their post, the two things that were responded to them, and then waiting for me to respond, and if I don't respond, well, I guess I don't have to fix anything. No, I kind of break my students of that line of thinking early. And by the time we get to week 6, 7, 8, we're having very robust conversations, and they are really leveraging all of the context that goes into this thread of discussion. So that's actually what I post on every thread. These rules go on every thread of discussion, just to remind my students, these are the minimally viable products you have to create. Are there other things you can do? Absolutely. There's some Netiquette. There's a nice infographic with a link to it, and I'll make that a point here in just a second. But you could give a minimum word count or a minimum paragraph count. You can certainly do that. You know, if you want to say it's got to be a minimum of 25 words or 50 words or 100 words, you know, by all means. That avoids things like LOL or I like that or really, really great post, which, you know, is just blowing smoke. But at the same time, you could say a maximum word count. There are times that I'd say to my students, you need to edit yourselves. You need to revise and work on self-editing. So there are times that I say, you can't just post a huge number of, you know, 12 paragraphs here. Nobody has time to go through that for the 50 of you that are in this class or whatever it might be. So there are times you might say there's a maximum word count with great intention. Again, utilizing proper Netiquette, just like the infographic you see there on the right from Turo. This is the kind of thing you can link out to so you don't have to kind of, you know, reinvent the wheel. You might build in students to do the moderating that I was talking about before. Let them be the ones who go in and try to synthesize and bring in, you know, multiple things that are coming along, which, by the way, as they are doing that, you can then play devil's advocate. You can come alongside and say, oh, I want to take an oppositional stance to what you posted here, which those moderators might cling on to and say, oh, well, how are you going to deal with what the devil's advocate thought was? How are you going to deal with that promotion? So it really gives you a nice chance to kind of come in and noodle with people and say, hey, are you sure you really thought through this? What about this other side? And it also gives you a chance to show that not everything is black and white. So if you're in a course where you're talking about something that isn't black and white, this is a really good opportunity for you to share that. I like to also encourage students to upload images and videos. You could do other things too. You could do poetry, you could do any number of other things that are basically analogies or metaphors, some way that they are connecting the words, the text, to an image or to something else that really kind of helps bolster what it is that they're saying. And sometimes they have to explain that in the post. They have to say, I uploaded this image because I think it really represents what we're talking about in this way. Man, you get a really rich sense of how your students are or are not ingesting and internalizing and understanding the information in meaningful ways. You really can see that pretty nicely. You can, of course, do other things. You can have a debate in your class. I'll tell you, that's one of my favorite 2 conversations I have in my public speaking class every semester are the debates. But I'm also telling you this, if you're going to have a debate, you need to be in there a lot. You need to set some really good ground rules for your students. And then you need to really watch that they don't get out of control. Debate in our country, unfortunately, has gotten ugly, especially in socially moderated or not moderated online environments. So you really want to be on top of that as you go. I hope that helps. I hope that helps give you some ideas about how to deal with discussions, how to think about that sort of teaching angle, especially in this time that we're in, that you're going to be using probably the rest of the spring and quite possibly next fall and maybe even next spring as well. If you set your classes up in the right way, this can produce much, much richer, deeper, better discussions than anything you've ever had face-to-face. So good luck to all of you and good learning.